All right, so we're talking about bodhicitta today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief sort of overview of bodhicitta, the word, what it means, and how it's understood in different traditions. And then I'm going to go through a short practice instruction text from Jamyang, which includes some pith instructions from Kyabje Togten Amtrun about bodhicitta, but also sky gazing, which is a kind of a core practice for us and for our tradition. So, but before we move on to that, I just want to sort of establish a few things. So, number one, generally speaking, particularly in the West, when we say the word bodhicitta, people think compassion. And there's no real problem with that, apart from the fact that the word bodhicitta doesn't mean that. The word bodhicitta can be broken up into bodhi, which means mind, and citta, which means, or citta, which means awareness. So it literally means the awakened mind of awareness, or in another way of putting that, a pristine primordial awareness. The awakened mind, enlightenment, which of course has sort of only one outflowing, which is compassion, love, kindness. So even though in the West, when we say bodhicitta, we tend to think compassion, it actually has quite a much bigger meaning. It means it's that awakened awareness, which means, you know, it's our fundamental nature, it's our Buddha nature, but it also means recognition of and abiding in emptiness. So it's actually something quite profound and special. So to sort of translate the word bodhicitta into just compassion, it really shortchanges the idea there. So, and that's why this talk's called bodhicitta, ground, path, and fruit, because we're coming from a particular kind of perspective here, where we start. There's an old saying, Dzogchen starts where it ends. It starts with the Buddha nature, or pristine awareness. It continues with focus on our own nature. We take our own nature as a path. And then it finishes with Buddha nature, enlightenment in its full flowering. So that's why this talk's called bodhicitta, ground, path, and fruit, because our nature is the ground. It's the place where we begin, but it's also the foundation of who we are. It's inseparable from who we are. It's also the path. So recognizing what our true nature is and fostering its expression, which is love, kindness, compassion, joy, evenness or fairness, and also recognizing its empty nature, you know. And then the fruit is to fully awaken to its potential, you know, to abide permanently in that state of pristine or primordial awareness. So that's sort of a bit of an overview of what that word means. And so depending on the tradition, that word gets a bit of a spin. It gets a bit of a flavor. So in the Mahayana, which has this focus on compassion, it very much, when we talk about bodhicitta, very much there's this idea that bodhicitta is all about compassion. It's not to say that bodhicitta is not about compassion, because again, the natural outflowing of our awakened state is compassion, joy, love, etc. But in other traditions, it has a different flavor. So in our tradition, we focus on this literal translation of bodhicitta, which is it's this awakened state, this awakened awareness, this pristine, fundamental, primordial awareness that we all possess as our nature. So in our tradition, the Dzogchen tradition, and in other traditions that focus on this kind of process or practice, like the Drukpa Kagyu, the Drikung Kagyu, these sorts of traditions, practice-focused ones, the emphasis is on taking our nature, that bodhicitta, as the path, rather than trying to sort of cultivate some external sort of thing called compassion, or some sort of external thing called loving kindness. We take our nature as the path, and then those things, loving kindness and compassion, they flower naturally. So this is really kind of like an important message. If we focus on our fundamental nature, our Buddha nature, bodhicitta, we don't need to do anything else. We don't need to cultivate compassion separately. We don't need to cultivate wisdom, which in our context means insight into the empty the nature of things. Because if we focus on our true nature, on that Buddha nature or bodhicitta, those things come naturally. They arise naturally from that state of awareness. So it really simplifies the path if you take bodhicitta as the ground, as the place where you start, as our inherent nature, and then take it as the path, take our inherent nature as the path, recognizing that, learning how to stabilize in that recognition, and then abiding permanently in that state. And then it's the fruit, of course, because bodhicitta means the awakened mind. It means enlightenment. So in the practice-oriented traditions, Druk Kagyu, Drikung Kagyu, the Nyingma Pa, there has always been a strong practice tradition. It's not to say that everyone in the Nyingma Pa or in the Drikung or in the Drukpa, every lineage is totally sort of simple practice focused, not at all. But there's always been, for the entire time of the history of those traditions, there's been a kind of practice that is this sort of simplicity, taking the nature or bodhicitta as the path and focusing primarily on that. And you could call that all kinds of things, but really the labels don't really help very much. But one way of sort of describing that would be to call it pristine Dzogchen or Arti Yoga. And in that tradition, going back to 665 CE in Vajrayana in northwest of India, that tradition, the principal practices were sky gazing, so using the sky as a meditative object, and also recognizing one's own awareness, and also cultivating our natural capacities in a kind of more natural way. So not sort of trying to be compassionate, trying to be kind, trying to be whatever, but just allowing those things to flower naturally, sort of to relax into the natural state and let those things arise. So in that form of very pared back, very simple kind of practice, which you could also call essence Mahamudra if you're in the Karma Kagyu, Drikung Kagyu or Drukpa Kagyu traditions, there was really just Guru Yoga and sky gazing. They were the practices. They didn't do anything else. It was really just that. That being said, it doesn't mean they didn't also have a favorite other thing they did. But those were the things that were essential core to this kind of practice. So I'm just going to sort of go through now, and this is on our website. It's not technically that easy to find, but if you go into the sort of books and articles page, and then there's like a link to our unique practices and stuff. So you click on that and it goes through this page where all this is stored. So this is there. It's called Sky Gazing, the Path of Joy and Ease. A teaching by Kyabje Togden Amchen, recorded by Jamling Temple. So I'm not going to go word for word through this, but I just want to sort of go through the ideas. And I will also, there will be a couple of bits that I will read out word for word. But, so there's different ways of approaching sky gazing. In some traditions, there's this very, there are these three postures that you can choose, and they're based on kind of your temperament when you're doing your sky gazing. And there's this idea that you have to have your eyes open, which you do in sky gazing, obviously, because you're looking at the sky. But also in some traditions, it's very strict about, no blinking, no movement of the eyes at all. Your eyes have to be completely still. That's not what this is. This is a much more relaxed approach. And the reason for that is because to relax, to rest, body, speech, and mind is kind of a fundamental preliminary for this practice kind of deepening and working. So that being said, the initial instruction that Jamling received from Kyabje Togden Amchen was really very simple. It's just to gaze up at the sky for a decent period of time each day. That's kind of it. So there was no instruction about posture, no instruction about how to keep the eyes, no instruction about time of day. In some traditions, there's like do it at dawn. In other traditions, it's like do it at dusk. In the Chan tradition, the Chinese Zen tradition, they would do it at dusk, usually in an elevated position, and they would look at the horizon. So the other traditions have very sort of like formal guidelines about how you do this. But in this tradition, it's just to look at the sky and relax, you know, and that's it. It's very formless kind of a practice. So there's no, like mantra you need to do. There's no visualization you need to do. There's no sort of prep you need to do. You don't have to be in a particular posture. As I said, there's these three postures. Two obvious ones are the lion posture, and then there's the rishi posture. But you don't need to be in any of those postures. You just can be in whatever posture is comfortable for you. Padmasambhava said, whatever posture feels best is best. So whatever is comfortable for you is best, because discomfort, obviously, it undermines your relaxation, and obviously undermines your ability to just sit, to just sort of be still in that way. So the initial instruction is really, really simple. Just look at the sky for a significant period of time each day. Although that's very simple, there's some stuff there that's important. Significant period of time. We're not talking about 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. We're talking about half an hour to an hour, a significant period of time. And also, where he also says, just gaze up at the sky. So the instructions that I've received around this practice are a little bit different, but I'll kind of include them here and you can decide for yourself if they help. So if you wear glasses, I was told take them off, so that you're not actually staring, you're just sort of looking gently. And this kind of practice, I just sort of I've observed Jamyang doing this for many, 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 many years. So he sits in a somewhat reclined position, and he's not putting any effort into his posture, right? And he just looks up at the sky, and his eyes are definitely up. He's not looking directly in front or down. His eyes are definitely up. So I can tell from, just observing him that that's a good posture, relaxed, eyes up, gazing into the sky. And he's been doing it for many, 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 many years. So I've been witness to this for many, 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 many years. Okay, so I will read out some stuff here that's from Kyabje Togden Amchen, which again, this is in this document, which is on our website. The luminosity of the blue sky is bodhicitta itself. That seems like a kind of shocking statement, because when we think about our ultimate nature, we think very much internal, don't we? It's inside, it's interior. But in this tradition of teaching, there's a kind of quite common phrase, which is that everything is permeated by pristine awareness. Everything. And then you can even take that further, where they will say everything that appears is pristine awareness, or is Rigpa, or is the Buddha nature, or is the clear light, the luminosity, whatever sort of tradition you're in, they will use this kind of a language. And so that collapsed the separation between outer and inner. So we have this idea that we have this inner nature and that everything outside is somehow the dualistic world, samsara, This collapses that idea quite profoundly. There's no separation between outer and inner. Everything that you perceive is bodhicitta itself, the ultimate nature itself. You can't perceive anything else. We're perceiving it in a distorted way. It all seems imperfect, some of it unpleasant, but in its ultimate nature, everything arises from awareness and then abides in awareness and dissolves back into awareness. So everything is of that nature. So when Togden Amchen says the luminosity of the blue sky is bodhicitta itself, that's quite a profound statement. It's a very kind of simplified way of saying what a lot of Dzogchen texts say over many, many dozens of lines, And then he says, we do not need to remind ourselves of this fact. Again, we always like to sort of work at it, remind ourselves, remember, work. But he's saying you don't need to do that. The heart knows this immediately as it gazes into the limitless blue luminous expanse. So on some non-dualistic level, there is this unity, Our nature knows. Our dualistic mind does not know. Our dualistic mind deludes us. But our nature knows, On some level, our fundamental nature knows. So, and then it says, as the heart opens itself wide with joy. So clearly, this is sort of saying that the joy practice, which we also teach in this Sangha, is a good thing to start with when you're doing a sky gazing. When your heart opens itself wide with joy and effortless love, the self, so what we call Pema, will loosen and dissolve in the face of the true nature, which is represented by the sky, or actually is the sky. So as your heart opens, so this is an interesting thing. When you sort of say just sit and look at the sky, you might think, well, what's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. But I can guarantee, having witnessed someone who is a really expert sky gazer doing this over many, many years, what happens is that his heart has just opened up, filled with love and compassion and joy, to the point where sometimes I find it a little irritating. It just wells up and he's not doing anything to produce it, So this is really interesting. You don't have to do anything, but this joy, this love, this compassion, it just swells up. You don't need to remind yourself, this is bodhicitta. You don't need to do any work at all. But just by sitting there in that restful state, relaxed, just looking, it almost sounds like magic, but it's not. It's our nature recognizing itself, And the more relaxed you are, the more kind of joyful you are, the quicker that will happen. While we're uptight and the dualistic mind is going, something's got to come out of this. I've got to get something out of this. I have to be something better than I am. All this stuff that blocks our nature. So as soon as you sort of relax and rest, the nature comes up, and its characteristics in the early state is love, compassion, joy, evenness, or contentment, and treating everything the same. So that happens like without effort. It's completely effortless, which is really kind of a selling point for this practice, So the other thing is, it says here, the radiance and spaciousness of the sky naturally places our minds in a state of connection with the great perfection. So the great perfection is one way of translating the word Dzogchen, or actually not Dzogpa Chen Po, which means translated lots of kinds of ways, but the self-perfected natural state. So it's the natural state that bodhicitta is another way of saying that. Bodhicitta and vast spaciousness combined, that's what the great perfection is. Mingling as one, abiding as one. So you can also do the practice while you're sky gazing. That's traditionally actually done. You can kind of do a bit of joy and practice, and then settle into sky gazing with the and then just relax and do nothing. Or you can just go straight into sky gazing, just straight into it. You don't necessarily have to make it a thing. It can be very simple and relaxed and uncomplicated and effortless. So then, so one thing that's important to get is that sky gazing is a fast track. So if you've already been developing your practice and your sense of spacious emptiness through practice, this is a shortcut. This can't happen. You can't do this practice without some kind of foundation, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And that foundation is quite simple. I'll get to it. Maybe I'm going to make sure that I cover Kyabje Tolchen Amchin's specific teaching on bodhicitta. So I don't want to. So we'll do it now, I think. So the foundation, in this kind of lineage, we always talk about things in terms of view, meditation or the practice, conduct or ethical living, and then the fruit or realization. So we're always talking about those things: view, meditation, conduct, realization, the fruit. So the view that's an essential foundation for this practice is, number one, just knowing vaguely that everything is the natural state. Everything is Rigpa. Everything is the Buddha nature, just that basic thing. But then that has to sit on a foundation of really understanding impermanence. I'm kind of always going on about these things, but they're really sort of important, and we really don't get them. If we understood impermanence and had a heart awareness of impermanence, we wouldn't do anything else but practice Dharma. We wouldn't. We would be happy to live in the gutter, impoverished, dirty, and naked, and just do the Dharma if we really got impermanence. But we don't. So we have all this other stuff going on, you know. The second thing that's an important foundation is this idea of Buddha nature, which I said before. Just this idea of the bodhicitta, the Buddha nature, that is our nature. That is our nature. It is stainless, can't be made better by performing good deeds or doing practice, in fact, can't make it better. But also it can't be damaged, destroyed, blocked completely by anything we do. It is unborn and undying and is unaffected by anything we do. So it's always there in its pristine state, always accessible, right there. It's right there in our awareness, you know. So you have to have confidence that you have that nature and therefore can be free. If you don't have confidence that you have that nature and can be free, no practice will work, because the dualistic mind undermines everything through its, you know, sabotaging of your practice by making you like literally think this is not going to work because I'm useless, I'm pathetic, I'm blah, blah, blah. The third thing that's an essential part of this foundation is emptiness, obviously, and you need to have a sense of that. To really understand and truly have a heart awareness of emptiness is right next door to enlightenment. So that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just a basic understanding that all things are deeply interconnected, all things are deeply interdependent, everything is fluid, not solid, and that our perception distorts reality, makes us think or perceive things as permanent, solid, and real when they're fluid, impermanent, dynamic, totally in flux at all times, and fabricated constructions. Okay, so that's the kind of foundation you need. And then as well as that, shamatha training is super important. But it's not like you have to do shamatha first and then go to sky gazing. So long as you're doing some meditation, shamatha, which means just to actually have an object, which is usually the breath, but you can have your eyes open and be looking at something. That will really support the sky gazing practice. And then obviously you have to be living by the ethical conduct of the 5 precepts. I say this over and over and over again. If you are not holding the 5 precepts, if we are not holding the 5 precepts, we are not Buddhists. Anyone who is not holding the 5 precepts is not a Buddhist. Not only that, but they can't be a Dharma teacher. Not only that, but they're going nowhere. The precepts are core and fundamental. Okay? So the other thing I want to say about that, about this set of stuff as the foundation, is that although you can kind of step into sky gazing while you're developing this foundation, you don't have to wait, you know. That doesn't mean, and its simplicity doesn't mean that it is inconsequential, easy, you know. It may be effortless, but it is not inconsequential. It's quite profound. It's been the heart practice of the practice-focused lineages for more than 1,000 years, you know. So it's not second or optional. It's core, you know. So we have to get that sense, even though it seems so kind of like simple and easy, it's core to what we're doing here. Because without it, the process is slower by a significant amount. Shamatha will get you to a sort of a recognition of emptiness. It will get you to a natural awakening of compassion, love, and joy. It will, but sky gazing makes this much faster. Like it really speeds it up. Okay, now, in some other traditions, you can't do sky gazing until you've taken refuge, taken the precepts that come along with refuge, taken the bodhisattva vows, taken a higher yoga empowerment, like Anuttara yoga empowerment, taken the tantric vows, done a nundro, done a 3 roots kind of practice. So Lama Yidam Dakini type practice, and then they would give it to you in some other lineages. That's how this is done. But that flies in the face of how it was originally taught, and it was originally taught without all that. So all that, if you hear someone going, oh, that's like, you shouldn't be doing that. That's part of like this particular thing, and you shouldn't do that until you have no, blah, blah, blah. That's all part of the way that the tantric system in Tibet has colonized everything. But this can be practiced without any kind of tantric engagement. Okay, so going back to this idea of what is bodhicitta, right? So Togden Amtryn, Khyentse Togden Amtryn, he said, this is really about what bodhicitta is, but also about this idea that you need to cultivate it. And you also separately need to cultivate wisdom, which is insight into emptiness. So he says, true wisdom and compassion are one, not two. They both arise in the heart, not in the mind, and both arise in unison. So that's what we would call co-emergent. They emerge together, always. Together they are known as bodhicitta, the awakened heart. They are not separate. Where compassion arises, the scent of wisdom is there. When true wisdom arises in the heart, compassion is there also. Always inseparable, always one. Bodhicitta, or awakened awareness. There is no need to do separate practices to cultivate each separately. Absolutely no need. Every true practice in the Dharma will give rise to both simultaneously. Every legitimate, authentic practice will give rise to both simultaneously. And I already talked about shamatha, which is the core practice in Buddhism. And then vipassana, another kind of meditation, core practice in Buddhism. Both will give rise to compassion and wisdom. Both of those practices will do that, as will sky gazing, as will the joy practice, as will kind of anything else that we encourage you to do. Every true practice in the Dharma. So if it doesn't give rise to both simultaneously, it's not real Dharma. It's something else, So do not worry about that. Don't worry about trying to cultivate this thing and that thing. Just do this simple practice and they both will arise naturally. And it is the dualistic mind that has separated wisdom and compassion. Obviously, enlightenment is non-dual. I feel like I should repeat that. Enlightenment is non-dual. There's no two separate things. There's no Pema and an awakening. There's just the awakened state. So that the enlightened beings know only one thing, bodhicitta. That's it. That's all they know. This unity. Okay. So that's a really liberating, I think, instruction. Because so often in the Dharma, we're made to feel like we have so much to do. But in reality, we can simply settle into a few simple practices that can be done anywhere at any time with no empowerment. Let me ring that bell loudly again. Simple, easy, free, without empowerment. These practices don't require you to humble yourself or commit yourself or hand over your wallet to any being. These things are your birthright as sentient beings. So that's a really important part of what we're trying to do here at Pristine Awareness, is we're trying to make the practices that are everyone's birthright accessible and affordable, which really we shouldn't have to be trying to do, because every Dharma organization should be doing that. Okay, so there's some other things here, which I'll go over kind of each one in turn. So I pointed out that it's an ancient practice going back to at least 665 CE, but probably before that, because we have early sutras that hint at it from the Buddhas, sort of from the time of the Buddha. So although it's not explicitly described in the early sutras, we know that it probably begins there. So then, we need to get that it is associated with simplicity and ease and effortlessness. So that kind of like means we need to be sort of relaxed when we approach this. I'm going to take a little bit of a break because I've got something happening here. I'll just come back in a minute. I'll pause the recording. Okay. So I'll just read this from the commentary by Jamyang. Sky gazing is an ancient meditation practice that is based on the understanding that we do not need to produce, fabricate, or create the awakened state, but rather that we simply need to get out of our own way and allow our true nature, our natural perfection, to shine through on its own. It is a practice associated with the dakinis. So this is an interesting point. So, you know, in Buddhism, particularly in Tantric Buddhism, we divide everything up into some male and female energies. And this practice is associated with the dakinis. Why? Number one, because it's about the sky. Dakini literally means sky goer, person who goes into the emptiness of the sky. But also because it is about recognizing emptiness and recognizing our true nature, both of which are feminine in our system of thinking about things. So it's a practice associated with the dakinis, which really means it's about spacious awareness. So, and again, so you might have heard this phrase, and I don't like using these phrases that get bandied about a lot, but sky gazing falls into the no method practice tradition. So you probably have heard in the non-dual space, you know, there's all these non-dual people about practicing non-dualism that talk about non-meditation. And also in Dzogchen and Essence Mahayana, you hear this phrase, non-meditation. As Dzogchen Rinpoche has quite strongly pointed out, that doesn't mean we don't need to meditate. It means that there are some practices that have no form. Generally speaking, when we talk about meditation, we have form, a posture and an object that we place our awareness on. This is a non-method process. So there's no posture you need to adopt. There's no kind of thing you need to do with your mind. And there's also no things you need to think. It's all just very formless. There's no sort of, and there's no, you're gazing at the sky, but that's not necessarily your object. Do you know what I mean? You're not making the sky your object in the way that when you're in shamatha, you're looking at, say, a pebble you might be having, if you're practicing with your eyes open, you might be looking at like a pebble or a crystal or a flower or a picture of your lama. You know, in shamatha, you can use your eyes to have an object rather than the breath. That's not really what's happening here, which is why when, you know, I said, if you wear glasses, take them off. Because you're actually not using it as an object. You're actually kind of becoming one with it, which is a very different thing. Also, you don't need to do anything with your breathing. It all just stays naturally. So there's a great teaching in this tradition, which is a meditation instruction, which is called resting body, speech, and mind in the natural state. And in that instruction, also sometimes it's called the corpse posture. But in that instruction, you're told, don't do anything with your body, just lie down. Don't do anything with your speech or breathing, just leave it alone, just let it be what it is. Don't do anything with your mind at all. Just let your mind be what it is. You know, and sometimes they would do it with their eyes closed and sometimes with their eyes open, looking up at the sky. And they're just completely still and relaxed, you know, because the point is not to do anything in this sort of non-meditation type practice. It's to do the opposite of what we routinely do, which is try to do stuff all the time. Look at my hands. When we talk, we gesticulate. When we're in meditation, we adopt this formal posture and we apply control. You know, this is opposite. It's not about control. It's about letting go, relinquishing control, letting the body be what it is, letting the mind be what it is, letting the speech be what it is, letting your energy and breath be what it is. Just letting it all be what it is. Don't try to change it or move it or make it something else, because it's already fine as it is. It's already fine. Perfect, in fact. So this restful aspect is really important. You know, Doga Khyentse once said, you can't recognize the nature of mind through control or force in the same way that you can't tame a horse through control or force. You have to rest and be relaxed in the same way with a horse. You are gentle, relaxed, loving, and the horse will start to like you naturally, you know, rather than try and control it. And, you know, even in our Western language, you could call it breaking a horse. Horrific idea. So the idea is to just let everything be and just relax and rest, and the true nature shines forward, comes forward naturally, you know. So I'm going to kind of go over this idea again that the sky is bodhicitta itself, which means it is awakened awareness itself. This is a hard thing for us as Buddhists to grasp, you know, because we're taught samsara sucks. You know, samsara sucks. It's poison. It's misery. It's the cycle of chaos and suffering. We're taught this, right? To then be told, actually, everything that appears to you in terms of your perception and your mind is awareness itself, is enlightenment itself. That's a bit of a shocker, because we see imperfect things when we look. We hear imperfect things when we listen. We, all the time, smell imperfect things when we're smelling, you know. But that's all a distortion, you know. In its raw energy, everything is enlightenment, you know. In its fundamental state, everything is awareness. In the Nyingmapa, we often say everything is wisdom, or everything is emptiness, is another way of saying that. But what it means is that everything arises from that natural awareness we have, which we all share. It's not like I have a natural awareness and you all have your own separate natural awarenesses. It's one unified natural awareness, which was never born, so it cannot die. It's luminous in nature. This interesting thing, when you're sitting in meditation, particularly if you're doing meditation in the dark, which is a common practice, when thought rises, there's a sense of light, you know, because what arises in the mind is the radiance of our natural awareness. It's luminous, you know. So even if you're sitting in complete dark, there's a sense of luminosity, of light, because that's what awareness is. It's luminous in its nature. All right, so we don't really need to work hard to try and accept this, though, I will say, because sitting in the practice will do that. We will come to be certain of it just by doing the practice. Again, this particular style of practice, it's a detour around the intellect. So rather than using kind of concepts to try and understand, rather than using our mind to sort of think it through, we just do the practice and have to trust that the practice will bring clarity. This is also quite difficult for us. We like to understand cognitively what we're doing, what's happening, what the nature of reality is, what our nature is, etc., etc. But you can't know those things with the intellect. You cannot know pristine awareness with the dualistic mind. That is impossible. We cannot know emptiness with the dualistic mind. Impossible. We cannot even know our own true nature with the dualistic mind. Impossible. The dualistic mind's a blindfold, you know. So it can only be done through practice. You know, we have all this, like, you know, some people might say wealth of philosophical, you know, writing and teaching and debate and discussion about the true nature of emptiness, the true nature of the mind, blah, blah, blah. But really, that's all a burden, because it doesn't help us. You can only understand what an apple tastes like by biting the apple. I can tell you all, apples are sweet, apples are crunchy, apples are juicy. But each of those words just points to other words, you know, and then those words to other words, and those words to other words. And sometimes it might point to a memory, but you'll never really know what the apple is like unless you bite it and you eat it. That's the only way. You have to do the practice. It's impossible to cognitively or intellectually get this. So then another important thing is to have no objective or goal. So we're always talking about, you know, taking your nature as a path and awakening for the sake of sentient beings. But it's important that we not sit there wanting some kind of experience to happen. And it's important that we're not sitting there wanting to become something. Like, I want to become a Dzogchen, or I want to be a yogi or yogini. I want to be enlightened. I want to be something. Because that's all just the ego wanting to do its usual thing, which is to take everything and try to turn it into an ornament for itself. You know, it's important that we try to let go any idea of wanting to be something and just relax. You know, when we're asleep, we're not all trying to be something. Particularly me. Like, I sleep like an absolute corpse. I'm not trying to be anything in that state, you know. When our natural state is most evidenced when we're asleep. The body is completely still. It's not animated by any thoughts. It's just still. It's motionless. The mind is completely still, like in that state in between dreaming and waking. You know, it's just completely still. It's not dark though. It's luminous. And the speech or the energy or, you know, that's all just still. We're not talking. We're silent. You know, so that's an indication of what our natural state really is. Really still, really calm, really relaxed. That's our natural state. So when it's not like, and I think, I can't remember, I have to ask John Young, but I think it was Jamgon Mipam Rinpoche who said, it's really okay to just be like you're going to sleep, to just have that attitude that you have when you're going to sleep, just really relaxed and restful and not like trying to do anything. It's really just okay to have that idea that, oh, I'm just relaxing, you know, I'm just, you know, settling in and just going to sit here for a bit and look at the sky, you know, to also sort of like remove the high and low of it all. And as I said before, usually sky gazing is taught at the kind of, trekchö level of Dzogchen. So it's usually considered to be a kind of high practice. But that idea is not helpful at all. We need to have this idea that this is just how we are naturally. We just sit and relax naturally. Everyone can do it. The dog can do it. The cat can do it. Everyone can do it, you know, because this division between high and low, high or special or secret practices and easy, fundamental, basic practices is a profound poison. We need to look at all of the practices as perfectly equal. And they are. That's because they are, you know. And we can't sort of think that this... It's interesting, really interesting to me that, well, like when you get kind of in the context of that whole long system, you know, people really do freak out when they get to this point because they go, well, then why did I do all of that? It freaks them out. You're like, why did I do the Nundro? Why did I do three-year retreats to do Lama Yidam Dakini practice? Why did I do all that? When now I'm told, just do nothing, you know, because most of us want to be smart, want to be clever, want to be accomplished, want to be able to ring the bell, bang the drum, blow the horn in public, wearing the white robes. You know, that's what most people want. They want to be flashy, accomplished yogins and yogis and yoginis. You know, that's what they want in their mind. They don't want to be of benefit to sentient beings, really. They don't really want that. So everything's about accumulating more and more practices and you know, something I often say, because I teach writing and editing and stuff, is that everyone wants to be a writer. No one wants to be a reader. You know, so few people read. It's shocking. But everyone wants to be a famous author. And the people who want to be famous authors don't read. The similar thing happening here. People want to be teachers. They want to be accomplished. They want to be wearing the hat, wearing the robes, doing all this stuff, but they don't want to actually practice. They don't want to actually free themselves, and they don't actually want to free others. There's something perverse going on with a lot of us, you know, and I will admit, I was like this when I was young. You know, I wanted to learn all the fancy things. I wanted to do the fancy stuff, go to fancy places, have all the gear, you know. I was like that when I was younger. And it didn't do any good for me or anyone else, you know. I'm not saying, however, that people who are drawn to a particular kind of practice that is maybe a bit flashy are totally doing it just for their ego's sake. Sometimes their motivation is pure, but I am suspicious. You know, if a lot of what people do is sort of public, group, showy sort of stuff, and they never are doing solitary, quiet stuff, I start to get a bit curious as to what their motivation is. Okay, so I'm just going to read this little reminder from Jamyang. We must never forget that all formless practices, such as sky gazing, will only bring us to awakening when built on a solid foundation of meditation practice, ethical conduct, and a heartfelt experience of the fundamental contemplations of the Dharma, as in the four thoughts that turn the mind of the Dharma, you know, which we have as our daily thing. Also, we need to understand love and compassion, which in the Tibetan tradition we might call relative bodhicitta. We also need to have some sort of basic sense of what emptiness is and confidence in our Buddha nature. So this foundation needs to be there, which if those of you who are doing our program, that's what this first year is, building that foundation so that you're absolutely certain of your ability to be free, that you have no doubt that you can be free and that there's nothing about you that needs to change, because nothing about you needs to change. You don't need to learn another language, go to some other place, change your hair, change your clothes, says the person who pretty much always wears Asian clothing, because I find them more comfortable. You don't have to do any of that. You can just be who you are as you are right now, and you can awaken. You know, the only thing that really is essential, apart from those kind of like that foundation, you know, is to live ethically. That's so important. And it often gets completely lost in the wash. I don't know why, it's just a mystery to me. The Buddhists laid this foundation of ethics. It was the beginning. And so often we get so sort of swept up in learning all this stuff, you know, how to play the drum, how to ring the bell, how to blow the trumpet, how to, you know, all the mudras and everything. Like we get so wrapped up in that, but we're just awful to each other all the time, just mean and unkind and miserly and envious, and you know, it's just that stuff has to go first. You know, ethics is absolutely essential. So as Mahaguru Padmasambhava said, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I think this is the most important Dzogchen Pith instruction that he ever gave. So now that you're all waiting for me to read it out, you're all going to be probably disappointed, because it is. Though the view should be as vast as the sky, so he's talking about our view of our nature and our view of, you know, that pristine primordial awareness. It should be vast as the sky, you know, but our conduct should be as fine as sifted barley flour. So why am I saying that's the most important Dzogchen Pith instruction he ever gave? Because the two go together. They can't be separated. You can't be, you cannot be awakened if you're a shit. It's impossible. You have to live ethically. It's like they are the same thing, to be awake and to be loving, kind, and compassionate. They're the same thing. They're not different things. So to not be ethical is to not be Buddhist. Any kind of unethical behavior, and I'm not talking about little stuff, you know, that every human being does in the heat of the moment. We all get cranky, we all get a little bit tired, and sometimes, you know, say a slightly mean or nasty thing. I'm talking about the precepts. Don't harm others, ever. Don't deceive people or yourself, particularly about the place that you are at in terms of your spiritual development. Don't pretend you're higher than you are. You know, then, you know, don't abuse others for your own sexual gratification. Then don't use intoxicants. You know, these are fundamental basic things. I'm not saying, you know, don't have a beer here and there or a whiskey or whatever it is, but to get drunk, that's a break of the precept, you know. So to live without those things is to not be a Buddhist, you know. I can't emphasize that more. So then, now that I've got heavy and school marmy on you, I will go back to something kind of beautiful from Kebde Dzogchen Armtree. So this is a fifth instruction he gave to Jamyang. It's just a single sentence, so it's really kind of beautiful. I don't know if I should unpack it or not, because I think unpacking it might do it a disservice. So I might just read it, and then I'll give you time for questions. So this is the fifth instruction from Kebde Dzogchen Armtree. In complete relaxation, everything becomes equal naturally. That's such a big deal. In complete relaxation, everything becomes equal naturally. I don't think I need to unpack that. All right. I'm going to turn the recording off before we have questions, just because sometimes questions are a little bit personal and I want to protect your privacy. So I'm going to end the recording now. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll do questions now.